Good evening, everyone, and welcome. On behalf of the Zeta Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, I am Deidre Davis, chapter president, and it's truly an honor to welcome each of you to tonight's Mayoral Forum and Civic Engagement Conversation. We are especially grateful to our partners, the other graduate chapters of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated here in the District of Columbia, Xi Zeta Omega, Rho Mu Omega, and Alpha Beta Upsilon Omega, for standing together in the spirit of service, leadership, and community empowerment. Together, we recognize that civic engagement is not simply about voting on Election Day. It's about being informed, engaged, and intentional about the future of our communities. As women committed to service and advocacy, we understand that the decisions made by elected leaders directly impact our families, our schools, our neighborhoods, and the opportunities available to future generations. That is why spaces like this opportunity to hear directly from candidates, ask thoughtful questions, and make informed decisions grounded in issues and solutions. We also want to extend sincere appreciation to tonight's moderator, award-winning journalist and Howard University professor Jennifer Thomas, and the mayoral candidates for your willingness to participate in this important dialogue and for your commitment to public service. Thank you for taking the time to engage directly with the community. To our members of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, community leaders, neighbors, and guests, thank you for being present and invested in the future of Washington, D.C. Your participation reflects the power and importance of an informed electorate. And finally, we offer special thanks to Grow Democracy D.C., Civic Education Fund, and Kenyatta Smith for joining us later this evening to provide a refresher on ranked choice voting following today's candid conversations. Ensuring voters understand both the issues and the voting process itself is critical to strengthening civic participation and empowering our communities. So thank you for joining us. We look forward to a meaningful and engaging conversation. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to Megan Moore, a Zeta Omega chapter member and the chair of tonight's event. Megan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Davis. And as we continue this evening's program, we now turn our attention to the purpose of tonight's gathering. With just 5 days remaining before the June 16th election, this forum was thoughtfully designed to foster meaningful dialogue with those seeking to lead our city. Rooted in candid conversation and civic engagement, tonight's discussion provides an opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, gain a deeper understanding of their priorities, and explore the issues shaping the future of the District of Columbia. As voters prepare to cast their ballots in this historic election, the district's first to utilize ranked choice voting, an informed electorate remains essential to a strong and vibrant democracy. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated has long been committed to advocacy, voter education, and civic participation. This forum reflects that commitment by creating a space where information, engagement, and community can come together in service of an informed electorate. To guide us through tonight's conversation, we are honored to welcome an accomplished journalist, educator, scholar, and communications expert, Professor Jennifer Thomas. She is an associate professor of journalism and director of the Anna Berg Honors Program at her alma mater, Howard University. A Fulbright Specialist Scholar and international speaker with the U.S. Department of State's Speaker Program, her research explores journalism practices, media representation, and the intersection of women in media. She is also an award-winning broadcast journalist with decades of experience, including making history as the first Black woman executive producer at CNN. During one of the most significant moments in modern American history, she served as the producer of CNN's 9 a.m. broadcast on September 11th. A former Scripps Howard Foundation Teacher of the Year, Professor Thomas has mentored generations of journalists who have worked to earn regional and national recognition. She holds a Master's of Arts degree in journalism from Columbia University and is the founder of Media Ready Consulting, LLC, a firm that specializes in media relations training and strategic communications. Please join me in welcoming our moderator for tonight's conversations with DC mayoral candidates, Professor Jennifer Thomas.
Good evening, and thank you so much, Megan. And on behalf of the members of the 4 Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated graduate chapters based right here in the District of Columbia, we thank you for taking time out of your schedule for this candid conversation. Now, in addition to our community service efforts, we're also concerned about public policy issues. And this evening, we will be in candid conversation with our DC mayoral candidates about the policies and issues that are most concerning for our community. So, grab your cocktail, your mocktail, your spritzer or tea, and let's do a deeper dive on where the candidates stand. We begin with Talib Kareem Muhammad. And thank you, Attorney Muhammad, for joining us this evening for our candid conversations. Voters across the district are looking for leadership that can unite communities, address longstanding challenges, and deliver real results for residents in every ward. So I want to begin with asking you a question regarding mental health and Black youth suicide. Now, in communities across the country, including here in Washington, D.C., they're confronting a growing youth mental health crisis with increasing concern about anxiety, depression, trauma, and suicide among young people. And Black youth in particular are experiencing rising rates of suicidal ideation and suicide attempts, while often facing barriers to culturally competent mental health care, school-based support, and early intervention services. Families, educators, faith leaders, and community organizations are all calling for a more coordinated and proactive response that prioritizes prevention, access, and stigma reduction. Now, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated has consistently emphasized health equity, youth development, and strengthening families and communities through advocacy and service. So the question is, what specific steps will your administration take to address the mental health crisis affecting Black youth in Washington, D.C., including what we mentioned earlier, rising suicide rates? And how will you ensure that young people and their families have access to culturally responsive mental health services, prevention programs, and crisis support?
First of all, let me start by saying Assalamu alaikum to all of our sisters who are joining us, who are also Muslim like I am. I know at least two members of this esteemed chapter who are Muslims, including the beautiful woman who I met while going to Colorado to hear another funny named lawyer speak about why he wanted to be president, and that's Barack Obama. And I met there the beautiful Rahima Abdul Alim, an established attorney, and she impressed me so much that I decided to marry her so shortly thereafter, and together we have a beautiful daughter. I also want to, when they were mentioning your accolades about being from Howard, we have a chant that's usually said, which was H. But I knew this thing was being taped, so I didn't want to go off protocol. So I'll throw that in right now as well. And I also must say to this esteemed and brilliant chapter, thank you. I want to say that, first of all, because what you're doing is off the script. Off the script, meaning to say that many of our civic organizations have followed the script of the billionaire elites that are controlling the District of Columbia. And it ties into the question that you said, but many of them did not allow candidates like myself to even get an opportunity to speak to their membership. They only focused on the two billionaire, funded and chosen candidates. And so many of us didn't get a chance to be on the television debates. Many of us didn't get a chance to, get our names basically posted all over the city. And many of us, basically got locked out of the voter data and the donor data. And so for all you sisters who are looking for my name on the ballot that's getting ready to be finalized on the 16th, I'll say to you right now that my name isn't on there because I have officially pivoted from the Democratic primary to the November general election as an independent candidate. And so, allay any concerns that you might have, that's when you'll see my name. Now, the reason why you should choose me in November directly relates to the question that is before us right now. And I'm really glad that you started with this crisis of mental health. And the reason why our children are, suffering so much is because the breakdown of the family itself. We have a system in our city that's been operated by the people who are currently operating it. And I do know that you have one of your sisters who's running against me, who's a part of the system itself. But we have to look candidly at the result. DC spends more than any other place, and we're not a state, but any other state in the country except one, but yet our academic performances are at the bottom, including truancy, including issues of violence inside the classroom. And it all relates to the mental health of our children. Our children's mental health is suffering because our families are suffering. And our families are suffering because the system itself is set up against that family. What do I mean in terms of the classrooms? We don't teach, first of all, the basic idea about family structure. We used to have a wonderful curriculum based on when I was in school. They don't have those types of programs right now in school. We don't teach abstinence. We don't teach abstinence before marriage. We don't even teach marriage. And because we don't teach these types of healthy relationships, and we know, again, look at the math. The math suggests that almost 90% of children who are born and raised, Black children, particularly in married households, are those that not only graduate from high school, but go on to either go vocational skills training or in college. So we know that, again, marriages are the, again, gold standard. But if we don't teach those in our schools, how can we hope that our children will be fostered in an environment where they can be free of the type of mental health problems that lead to, again, depression, sadly, even suicide? Second of all, as mayor, one of the things that we plan to do is to surge the teaching of both family structure, health, and creating the types of environment that leads to a positive outcome. And also incentivize, again, marriage, incentivize family staying together, and incentivize coaching through a universal basic income act that will pay families, again, based upon their ability to weather the storms and an ability to get help, such as coaching, and ability to make, again, available to their children all the mentoring and all the resources that the district offers. And I'll say this in conclusion. One of the things that we also see as a lawyer is what we call the family court to juvenile court to criminal court pipeline. I was just on a Zoom with Judge Eric Glover, who talked about how in his court every single day, 90% of the children who come there, boys, are there with only their mother or grandmother. And that is because in DC, particularly in DC public schools, only 70% of the children in DC schools, others in the homes. And again, this is not by mistake. This is intentional. And the people who are currently running the District of Columbia government are intentional about continuing that. And prayerfully, as the mayor of the District of Columbia, we will end that system. We will make sure that, again, as you know, every child needs a village. And the village has both fathers as well as mothers. And we intend to be intentional about making sure that we strengthen that village, so then our children can feel loved, that our children can feel supported, and our children don't have to be like, and in conclusion, my son who goes to Wilson, formerly Wilson Jackson Reed High School, the captain of their football team was just killed 4 weeks ago, and there's not even again, one arrest. And the children know who did it. The child is walking around the school right now. And because, again, this is an election season, and people don't want to, again, make the mayor or make the council members who are running for the council look bad, they haven't arrested this child, and they're trying to sweep this under the rug with all this type of again, sweeping under the rug data that we just heard about these police officers who have just been reprimanded. This has to end. And prayerfully on November 3rd, you have a choice, sisters. You have a choice to either go along with the status quo, and again, even elect one of your own sorority sisters who's a part of that status quo, or you can do something different. You can choose to make sure that DC is safe. You can choose to make sure DC is more affordable, and you can choose that DC is finally a state as the 51st state. And that's what we plan to do. Thank you.
Thank you again for that, Candidate Muhammad. I have another question for you now. You have positioned yourself as a community center leader focused on equity, empowerment, and addressing systemic disparities, as you mentioned, affecting underserved communities in Washington, D.C. But at the same time, some voters may question whether your campaign has provided enough detailed citywide policy solutions and administrative plans to address the scale and complexity of issues like public safety, economic development, education, government accountability. And Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated has long emphasized both advocacy and measurable action, particularly policies that produce sustainable outcomes for Black families, women, youth, as well as vulnerable communities, excuse me. So my question is, how would your administration move beyond advocacy and vision to deliver measurable citywide results on issues like public safety, economic opportunity, education, and health equity? And what specific accountability measures would you put in place to ensure progress is felt across all 8 wards?
Ooh, great question. So let me share with you an example. I think that many people would say that the best president that we've had in the past 50 years was someone who was not a governor, someone who was not a mayor, someone who had no executive experience running either a state or a county, but someone who was an advocate, a community organizer. And that is none other than Barack Hussein Obama. Now, I would say, unlike President Obama, while he had no experience running, again, a nation or city or state, because he hadn't worked in any of those capacities, I have spent the last 35 years of my life working either for the DC government, the federal government, or in the trenches as either a small business owner in terms of economic activity or an operator of nonprofit organizations serving the needs of the District of Columbia, particularly our youth. And that background, the reason why I'm here, sisters, I'm here because I'm like you all, I was doing my thing, head down in the trenches, doing the work of what we do, worker bees do. And for 2 years in a row, I came before this council, including Councilmember Janice George and former Councilmember McDuffie, and asked them for money to fund the after-school program that would address this issue of mental health that we just talked about by keeping our children safe. Because as you all know, and educators that AKA members are, including yourself, Sister Thomas, know that the most violent hours of every day are 3 to 6 p.m. And why is that? That's because students are out of school. And generally, especially in the Black community, our parents cannot afford to pick them up, generally speaking, and take them home to make sure that they're safe. So they're at work. Right? Sometimes they're getting off the first shift, going to the second shift, right? And so we had a program that would have made sure that our children were, again, picked up, placed in an environment where they can get their homework done. Because again, as educators, you know that homework is the number one determinant of whether their child is going to be engaged the next day or going to be disruptive the next day, right? And also make sure that the child was mentored. How many of you all had a mentor in your life? I know I had, and that made a major difference. So make sure that every child has a mentor and a good meal. And then deposited safely back to their home. Do you know here in the District of Columbia, we don't have a bus system that makes sure that our children get from place A to place B? And now why can they have a bus system in Prince George's County, in Montgomery County, in Manassas County, and all these other municipalities around the District of Columbia, and yet we call ourselves the capital, the example, and yet we don't care the safety of our children enough to make sure that they have a bus system that picks them up and deposits them. Under my administration, prayerfully on November 3rd, with your help, we will end that and make sure that our children can get home safely and get to school safely. Now, again, also in terms of the experience, right, I've served as the chief of staff of the largest DC government agency, the largest one, the Department of Healthcare Finance. So I know how the District of Columbia is supposed to work. Second of all, I've served as a counsel to the past mayor and advised him particularly on issues of health and issues of, again, transparency. I also served as a counsel to the committee that's responsible for statehood in the DC Council. I've also served as the chief counsel for Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, another great AKA, who was responsible for this issue of statehood. If, again, the District of Columbia seeks statehood, we'd have to go through the Judiciary Committee. So again, these are the things, and I'll tell you that 35 years ago when I first came 36 years ago, the summer of 1990, when I first stepped foot here in Washington, D.C. Mayor Marion Barry was the mayor. And Marion Barry also was someone in that same kind of spirit, as you all know, who was a community organizer. But his commitment to the people, his love and deep understanding for the people made him the greatest mayor. Despite his flaws, even despite his flaws, today, people by and large say that he's the greatest. And why? Look at the transportation system. The metro is by far the best transportation system we've had in the country. Again, the youth issues. We had the gold standard. The mayor's summer youth employment program was the gold standard. And now it's been hollowed down to almost nothing. Instead of, again, every child being given an opportunity for a summer program that then leads to a full-time job, that then leads to a prosperous career and a prosperous family. Instead of having every child being given that, only hundreds of children in DC have that. Under my administration, we will go back to that gold standard of Marion Barry. So again, dear sisters, I know it's again a stretch for some of you all to think about endorsing me and putting me in position to be the mayor. But I only again reference you to history. History shows that people like me who are committed and passionate and who are 100% dedicated to their people make the best executives. Because what we don't know in terms of experience, and again, I have the best of both worlds, both experience as well as passion. But again, to the extent that you look at someone who is a council member in a better position, or someone who's a former council member, I say that my experiences as an exec, my experience as a behind the scene worker bee, as a staffer to the people in the same positions, and my commitment and my love for the children of the District of Columbia as an educator and as an operator of a after school program that's seeking to keep our children safe put me in a position to be a much better candidate than all the other people on the ballot. And if you agree, I ask you go to talib4dc.com and make a $40 contribution today, because your $40 contribution will help me to defeat the billionaire funded candidates who are basically running again ads and who have their posters all over the District of Columbia. You will allow me to get again the funding that I need to be able to go toe to toe with them and to be able to fight for our families and fight for our children and fight for our seniors and fight for our small businesses. Thank you.
Candidate Talib Muhammad, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We are going to continue now with our candid conversations. Now we are joined by candidate Yaida Ford, and we thank you, candidate Ford, for joining us today, this evening, for candid conversations. And voters across the district are looking for leadership that can unite communities, address longstanding challenges, and deliver real results for residents in every ward. So we have a few questions for you this evening, and I want to start by talking about public safety, equity, and trust in government. So across the district, residents are asking for safer neighborhoods, more responsive city services, stronger educational and mental health support systems, and greater confidence that every community is receiving equal attention and investment. And many Washingtonians want solutions that both reduce violence and strengthen trust between residents and city government, especially in communities that historically have felt overlooked or under-resourced. Now, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated has long advocated for social justice, civil engagement, educational opportunity, and policies that uplift underserved communities. So the question, how would you make Washington, D.C. safer and more just while strengthening trust between communities and city government? And what measurable steps will your administration take to ensure that every ward feels equally protected, invested in, and heard?
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you to the women of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Corporation. I'm incorporated. I'm very privileged and honored to be here as a candidate. So let me just start off by saying that I am a civil rights trial lawyer by trade. I'm the only one in the race. And so I have fought on behalf of the most vulnerable populations in the district. And often I fight against the district for these residents. So I understand where I've seen the underbelly of DC government. I've been very disturbed by the constant lack of services, lack of responsiveness from city government to our residents, particularly in the communities that you identified. And as a civil rights lawyer, certainly there's some intersectionality between these communities, and then I'm the stopgap. I'm the middle person. I'm the one that's standing between them and access to justice. And so this issue is very important to me. So on the public safety piece, one of the first things that I would do is strengthen the Marion Barry Summer Youth Employment Program, because if we look at like a decade ago, before the current administration came in, and I'm talking about the mayoral administration. We had about 10,000 kids in that program every summer. It has dwindled down to 791 kids. And so resources, we have not allocated the resources to our children outside of the public school system. They have to have things to do outside of school. We also were dealing with a 40% truancy rate, right? But when kids know that there's that program at the end of the summer, that they can get that extra money, they can earn that, they have somewhere to go in the morning, they're not hanging out late at night. And there was engagement between some of the agencies and the Mary Berry, the program. The children were able to engage with DC government early on to see, hey, do I really want to work here later? Now, one of the issues that we had with the program is that kids would be getting paid, but they wouldn't necessarily be doing anything. One of the things I would like to do is take that program and create a school to government pipeline, like a jobs guarantee. If once you graduate from DC public schools or public charter school in the district, we could offer you a job at an agency where you had an internship, if you're interested in that. Certainly not all students would be interested. We know that city government jobs aren't the highest paying jobs, but it was a pathway and a clear one to the middle class for Black people when Mr. Berry was mayor. And so I want to build upon that and try to create, it will certainly boost civic engagement in our young people. They're outside with nothing to do, but we need to draw that in and draw on some of that energy and get them focused on a career path. We're also dealing with AI challenges right now. So for our college graduates and our college bound students, when they come out, when they come home, do they have something to come back to in the district? And so I want to combat that by using the jobs at city government to engage our students, particularly in agencies that are underserved. And this goes to your next question. How do we improve services? Because people are so upset about the services that they're getting, and not just in Ward 7 and 8. I hear the complaints in Ward 1 and Ward 4 and then Ward 5 about the lack of city services. So I would like to see some of our young people plugged into the agencies that are struggling so that they can help us provide better services. I think we need to do better with technology in DC government. I think we've done a great job in the last couple of years trying to cut down on some of the bureaucracy when it comes to licensing, because it seems like now you need a license to do anything in the district. I would like to engage our young people, though, in city government to make it easier for seniors to access services, to make it easier for people when they come into district government or even when they're calling, that somebody answers the phone. I'm the only business owner in this race as well. I run a law practice. And so I know how important it is to not have disgruntled people in the marketplace. DC residents are customers. And I've been on the side and I've sued several agencies just for bad customer service. Something that could have been solved, it grew into something like a huge legal challenge, but it couldn't be resolved at the customer service level. And so the district is wasting away taxpayer dollars on litigation because it just can't resolve things at a basic level. So I want to kind of get in and combat that. And I also I would love to do a survey, like a customer service survey to our residents so they can evaluate agencies' performance. And I just want to know at a granular level what has happened. Where's the breakdown between service delivery and resident expectations? That's what a business owner does. They come in and they listen. And then I would do the same survey of our government employees and their view of leadership and what that's been, and then, talk to agency directors and see how we can make our government work better.
I want to ask a follow-up question. You referenced earlier when you were talking about the youth, and I think you mentioned the truancy rates at up to 40%. I just wanted your thoughts. We've been seeing those viral videos at certain places in the city of the youth gathering and taking over. I can't remember offhand what they're calling that. Just what are your thoughts on how, as mayor, you could help with that problem that seems to be spreading across Washington and has a lot of residents very concerned and many on edge?
Yeah, so this is actually other municipalities are experiencing what they're calling the teen takeovers as well. So there are organizers. And so what I would like to do is engage the youth who are organizing this. Because if you can use your energy to organize a takeover, I think we can put you somewhere in the government where you would be effective, somewhere in our community where you would be effective. I've personally been present at some of the takeovers that are happening in my side of town, especially at Navy Yard. My office is in Navy Yard. And I went up to Fort Stanton because I got calls from residents. They wanted a civil rights trial lawyer up there because then I explained to the kids when I got there, listen to me, when the federal agents come, they are not going to see you as children and they are not going to treat you as children. And blood is going to be shed if we do not rein these children in. So I think that one of the first things to do is get the youth that are organizing these kids and try to see how we can engage them. That's the first thing. You know, it's not always law and order, punish them, lock them up. That's a Donald Trump approach. And let me just say this, for kids that we can't get our hands around, Donald Trump and Janine Pirro have a place to put them. That is not, as mayor, I cannot force a child to engage with me or engage with the community in a constructive way. But for those that want something, and I can say the majority of those children were very respectful. When I came outside, about 50 kids hanging out, and they were coming out in busloads. Very respectful. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Most of these kids want something to do. The rec center that they were hanging out at was closed. I think that as the mayor, we need to open up rec centers on holidays, extend the hours on weekends, and give these students an opportunity to do something constructive. And for those that are hell-bent on being destructive, you can suss them out very easily because they're the ones staying after it's time to go home. You shouldn't be out after 10 o'clock anyway, and your parents should be contacted and know where you are. And so do I think that parents should be locked up? Not if they're working. If a parent is at work, they don't necessarily know that their child has gone outside. I think they should be contacted. We're giving you 2 hours to come and get your child. That will stomp out some of this. But I think that we still, I think the government, we could do better. You know, we could do our part. Beyond that, once we've done our part, then I think it is going to take law and order that there has to be genuine consequences for some of our kids, because some of them we're not going to be able to reach. And that's just the reality, especially given the homes that some of our children come from. But I think that we have not done everything we can do. We simply haven't. And I knew that when I went to Fort Stanton, it was Memorial Day, and there were 50 kids sitting outside of the rec center listening to music. And I thought, okay, this rec center should probably be open. We should probably open this on a holiday. I think we could get some money out of the budget and pay our staff holiday pay to come and hang out with the kids and just have activities for them. They should not be hanging out unsupervised in neighborhoods. It frightens people. It puts people on edge. And our residents they're taxpayers. They deserve better. We should run this part of the city better.
Okay, I have a couple of questions remaining. That first, I want to ask you about statehood and the federal government. You referenced the federal government. Washington's unique relationship, as you know, with the federal government creates both opportunities and challenges, from congressional oversight and budget autonomy to public safety, federal land use, and of course, that ongoing debate over DC statehood. So, what is your vision for the district's relationship with the federal government, and how would you advocate for greater local autonomy while maintaining productive partnerships with federal leaders and agencies?
Yeah, I think the case that I would make to the federal government, particularly this White House, is that DC is a better place to be for Congress and for the members of Congress who live here, and even for the White House, when we have local control. We know our neighborhoods, we know our people, our police are locally trained. We have a community engagement division within MPD. And I would say, look, just give me the opportunity to do this and clean up our city and kind of help maintain some of the things that the White House was, viably concerned about, legitimately concerned about: the trash, the tent cities. That grew over COVID. We all saw it. I live in the city, we all saw that. And so that was a problem. And so I would say, allow us to do this and allow us to use our strength and our freedom to draw upon the resources that we have to make our city stronger. Now, I know that this White House will never give us statehood. It's not something they would ever support, because that means, we see them redistricting. So they don't want to lose their power on the Hill. But the fight isn't really with the White House on statehood. It's actually with the Democratic Party to say, look, if the Trump card is you need 2 extra Democratic senators, you would get that if you supported us. The Democrats have not really, and I can say this because I work on the Judicial Nomination Commission for DC, where we have to go to the president and say, look, we need judges at Superior Court and we need judges at the Court of Appeals. And the Democrats have let us down time and time again when we've needed them to fight to get our judges on the bench. And so now we have a Republican controlling, and he could care less if we're down a dozen judges. And so cases are moving slower, and landlord-tenant is a nightmare. And probate, forget it, and tax court is difficult. It's already difficult when you have a full bench. And so I think I would go to the Democrats and say, look, we're going to need your support, and we need it now. I would also use my resources. I'm in private practice, and so I have very strong relationships with the DC bar. We have some of the best lawyers in DC. and we need them on this statehood fight. The mayor, has never engaged the DC bar. The current mayor is not a lawyer, but certainly the DC bar has over 150,000 members. And those are all resources that are available to me as a member, but also me as mayor. And they would certainly be happy to step up and say, how do you need us to help you combat the White House, especially those that have already been marginalized and litigated with, the president has taken away some of our security clearances. He has blocked us from going into federal courthouses. So you have law firms with an axe to grind, and they have the money to grind that axe. And so I think the mayor should engage them to help engage in this fight for statehood. The OAG, the reason why I wouldn't use his office is because the White House has already introduced legislation to remove him. So the other candidates have talked about working with Brian Schwab or working with the AG. It's not going to work. As soon as they decide to shut him down and put in a Republican person, we're done with that. We have to use private resources and city resources, but you got to know which ones to use. And so, and I know that because I've been working with this city and frankly litigating against the AG on behalf of DC residents for the last 10 years. So I know that it's a creative way to do it, but it's also a way that I'm not going to be hamstrung because private lawyers can do what they want to do with their money, and they could help us to the extent that they can.
Okay, now we have a question from the community, and we have just a few minutes left. But you have emphasized grassroots leadership, community engagement, and giving voices to residents who often feel overlooked in city politics. However, some voters may question whether a grassroots-focused campaign can successfully navigate those political, financial, and administrative realities that are required to lead a major city government and implement large-scale policy initiatives. And of course, members of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated are especially concerned with leadership that can effectively advocate for women, children, and families while also building coalitions necessary to produce lasting policy change. So the question that we have is, how would you translate grassroots advocacy into effective governance, and what strategies would you use to build the political partnerships and administrative capacity necessary to deliver meaningful improvements in areas like maternal health, youth opportunity, mental health services, and economic equity for DC families? And we have a few minutes left with that big question.
Yeah. So I think grassroots, I don't know if I'd call it that. I think my approach to this is a little more holistic. I think we've ignored the partnerships that we could have when it comes to maternal health and the social determinants of health. Just to remind people, I live east of the river, so I see that we have the largest health disparities and social disparities in my side of town. And the people who are most effective at delivering that tend to be the nonprofits and the private organizations that like I said, are not hamstrung by bureaucracy to deliver services to our residents. And the people who initiate policy and develop policy the best, that brilliance is not, unfortunately, it is not within DC government. It is outside. I don't consider that grassroots. I just consider that being resourceful and knowing the partnership, the organizations that I can call on, because I've worked with them as a lawyer. Long before I was in private practice, I worked with the Legal Aid Society. We were very well funded by private law firms and donors. And within Legal Aid Society, I was able to work with the DC Fiscal Policy Institute. I was able to work with a welfare reform organization. All of these are privately funded groups that lobbied DC government to adopt the policies that they had already seen work in other jurisdictions. So what I'm saying isn't new. It's just something that when I worked on the council, so everybody knows, I used to work for the Ward 1 council member, Jim Graham, who is now deceased. And I was his legislative counsel. And the reason why Jim hired me is because he'd seen me on the lobbying side, working with private organizations to assist the council in implementing policy changes that were going to be effective, and we're going to deliver the change that council wanted. That was in 2012. That was a different council. We had Tommy Wells, we had Harry Thomas, we had Marion Barry, we had David Catania, Mary Che. These were real policymakers. We do not have that on the council anymore. So the mayor needs to come in with a policy background and with the organizations that know how to do this work to say, look, we need to build coalitions again so that we can actually hand down policies that are working for our residents, because the government's kind of been at a stalemate for the last 8 years.
Okay. Well, we thank you so much for joining us this evening, candidate Yaida Ford. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And we are going to continue our candid conversations now. We are now joined by candidate Vincent Orange. Thank you so much, Mr. Orange, for joining us today, this evening, for these candid conversations. And voters across the district are looking for leadership that can unite communities, address longstanding challenges, and deliver real results for residents in every ward. So we want to address a couple of questions, including one from the audience members. So I would like to start first by talking about education, youth opportunity, and the future of Washington, D.C. Now, many D.C. families are deeply concerned about future opportunities that are available to young people across the district. There are persistent disparities in educational outcomes, youth violence, workplace readiness, and access to enrichment programs to continue to impact communities differently, depending on your zip code and the ward. Residents are also looking for stronger coordination between schools, workforce development, public safety, and community organizations to ensure that young people are prepared to thrive in college, careers, and civic life. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated has long prioritized educational advancement, mentorship, leadership development, and investing in the next generation as essential to building strong communities. So the question, what is your administration's plan to expand educational equity and create clear pathways for DC youth to succeed in school, careers, entrepreneurship, and public service, regardless of their ward, neighborhood, or socioeconomic background?
Well, thank you very much for the question. First of all, I'm Vincent Orange, and I am a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And just like my AKA sisters, we are very committed to education. In fact, our slogan is go to high school, go to college. And the hopeless people is the voteless people. So we are definitely on board with the mission that our fraternities and sororities have. For me personally, I would not be here but for education. I come from an extremely poor background. Parents had sixth grade education, but my teachers really led the way for me, introduced me to a program called A Better Chance. I received a Better Chance scholarship and went to a boarding school and really found and saw what education is really all about. Went to school 6 days a week, mandatory study hall every night from 7 to 10. And it was a great experience. And I bring that with me to the office of the mayor. First of all, let's look at it in various categories. First and foremost, our 3 and 4 year olds need to start training for education, but we must not put those superficial labels of special education on them at that age. 3 and 4 year olds, we should be doing assessments. If they seem like they can't hear you, do they need a hearing aid? Have you examined their ears? If they can't see the words on the books, it's because maybe they can't see. Then let's provide, a vision examination. And after you go through all those assessments and protocols, if there's still a problem, then we need to go and visit and see what's going on in the home. I believe a 3 and a 4 year old should be preparing for kindergarten, where they come and take the seat. Now, from kindergarten to 3rd grade, there is a goal. The goal is when the student is about to enter the 4th grade, there will be a standardized test. We need that child to be able to read independently upon entering the 4th grade and being able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. I think what's lacking in the government is that we're not focused in on the curriculum. What should a kindergarten person master before going to the 1st grade? What should a 1st grader master before going to the 2nd grade and the 3rd grade in preparation for this standardized tests? And because if you can't read independently, if you can't add, subtract, multiply, and divide, how can I introduce you to fractions, to decimals, to algebra? You can't move forward. And that's where we begin to lose a lot of students, because now we're competing with kids that are prepared to move forward and with children that are not prepared to move forward, but then folks from the street start pulling them away and get them involved in all kind of bad activity. So I really want to focus on that. The new mayor will have the opportunity to support the chancellor. And my chancellor, I'm going to really dwell in on the curriculum and what is the end product. So now we have the kid in middle school. So now we want to get the kid in middle school ready for high school. And I want every person in high school, no matter your zip code, your income level, or whatever, to know that you have 4 pathways waiting for you when you graduate from high school. The first pathway is free tuition at the University of the District of Columbia. You want to continue your education, I'm going to allow you to do that at UDC. As the mayor of the District of Columbia, I have 90 agencies under my control. We will create youth apprenticeships for high school graduates. So I'm offering high school graduate retirement benefits, health benefits, and an entry-level job to move forward and grow with the government. For example, if you want to be an accountant, but you're not ready to go to school, I'm going to put you at the Department of Tax and Revenue. If you're into the environment, I'm going to put you at the Department of the Environment. If you want event planning, I'm going to have you down at Events DC, where all the conferences take place at the convention center. If you want to get into sports management, we are becoming the sports champions, of America. We are a sports town now. We have all the teams here, but we also have Audi Field. We have Nats Field. We're about to build this $4 billion dome stadium so we can get our kids involved in those entry-level positions to move forward. So that's two options. The third option is, okay, you want to go to a major university, we're going to give you the tag money up to $15,000. However, I don't believe that we should be giving our students $15,000 to leave DC. I want to sweeten the pie and get you to go to one of the 5 universities here, because generally where you graduate from, you wind up staying. So we don't want our best minds to leave. We want you here so you can grow and we can start training you as the next level of government, the next leaders in the District of Columbia. And then the fourth pathway is if you have a great business idea and you say, Mr. Orange, I know this idea will work, well, I'm going to put you over at the Department of Small and Local Business Development. So we can get you an attorney and get you an accountant. Let's examine your idea. Let's see, does it really have legs? So those are the 4 options that I'm going to give, and every student would know that. But I will also let them know crime will not be tolerated. Like they used to always tell us, you can take a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. So I'm giving you these 4 pathways, but I am not going to tolerate crime. And so that's what I bring to our young people.
Quick follow-up question. You mentioned free tuition to attend the University of the District of Columbia. And as an educator, I know how it is with staffing and costs just to have staff and professors. Is that something that UDC will be able to handle?
Well, it's something that the government would handle. I mean, we fund UDC. Right now, they get out of the $4.5 billion that we spend on education, $181 million goes to UDC. And I've already examined this because I tried to push this as a council member. It'll cost about $25 million to allow our high school graduates to go to UDC tuition free. And in a government where we have $22 billion, $12 billion comes from DC taxpayers, another $5.5 billion comes from enterprises like water and intergovernmental agencies, and then we get $4.5 billion from the federal government. So within that educational budget, I'm going to come up with $25 million and provide that to UDC so we can be tuition free. Everything else is already covered, like you said. They get $181 million. So I'm talking about increasing their budget to about $210 million. And I think indirectly, we're fighting crime because now I'm taking up young people's time. You can go to UDC tuition free, or I'm going to get you a job and you can help out at home because you're not ready to go to college, but you're going to have a paycheck and you're going to have health benefits. You're going to have retirement benefits. And so those are opportunities for our young people, and they will know that's what's waiting for them. But once again, we cannot allow teens to get involved in all this criminal activity. That just has to be something of the past. It has to be zero tolerance. The way this country and this world is moving right now, you have to be prepared because artificial intelligence is trying to put us all out of business and all the other technology that's coming. So you really need to be engaged because at some point, crime is just not going to be tolerated. They're going to have so much technology. They're going to know everything. So we need to get our people ready for what's coming their way.
Well, you referenced technology, and I want to ask, we have about 5 minutes remaining, and we do have a question from the community, kind of piggybacking on what you just talked about. Now, you have decades of experience, as you've mentioned, in DC politics and government, which many voters view as an asset. But at the same time, some residents question whether your candidacy represents a return to older political approaches at a moment when many Washingtonians are looking for new leadership styles, greater transparency, innovation, and solutions to modern challenges affecting families and neighborhoods. Members of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated are particularly focused on forward-looking leadership that addresses issues like youth mental health, maternal health, disparities, public safety, and economic opportunities for the next generation. So the question that we have is, how would your administration bring fresh, innovative leadership to today's challenges facing DC families and communities? And why should younger voters and women leaders believe your approach is better suited for the city's future rather than its past?
Well, first and foremost, I bring executive experience leadership with institutional knowledge. If you don't know where you've been, you definitely don't know where you're going. In addition to that, a new idea, UDC tuition free, is a new idea. Paid apprenticeships for our young people is a new idea. I am going to build 1,000 affordable housing units for our first responders, for our teachers, and for recent graduates, and utilizing the $100 million in our Housing Production Trust Fund. So I say, when you look at the other candidates, I just see immaturity. They can't even get together and have a conversation without going at each other and disrupting and showing chaotic behavior. We don't need that. Even if you look at our sororities and our fraternities, we don't put neophytes in charge. We put seasoned people in charge, and we bring the youth along and get them up to a level where they can step in and move forward. We're talking about a $22 billion government. I'm an attorney, I'm a CPA, I have a master of laws in taxation. And so that experience is going to do well for us. And I bring in young leaders. I always utilize the youth to get them trained, get them to move forward. But you have to know where you're going. And the biggest thing in this government right now, they're talking about a $1.1 billion gap. There is no gap. We don't have a money problem. We have a management problem. But we don't have people that understand that. So a quick example, you talk about public safety. Public safety, we're supposed to have 4,500 police officers. You know, for the last 5-6 years, we only had 3,100 because these youngsters came up with this idea to defund the police, and officers left, but they kept the budget at 4,500. You only have 3,100 officers. Where is that money? What did you do with that money over the last 5 or 6 years? You're talking about the youngsters. The youngsters want all this paid family leave, but paid family leave generated $400 million. It doesn't cost $400 million to run paid family leave. And you're paying for paid family leave for people that live in Maryland and Virginia, when Maryland and Virginia don't do it for DC residents. That takes knowledge. And then the traffic cameras. Traffic cameras generated $300 million last year. It's supposed to fund Vision Zero. Vision Zero is about $125 million. So where are all these dollars? So I'm going to establish a revenue alignment commission, and along with my background, put in the internal controls and make sure dollars are being spent for their intended purpose. And I'm also going to make sure that if you don't have a recurring revenue funding source, that you're not funding programs that don't have its own revenue cycle. And that's what's getting us in the trouble that we're in now. So, I applaud the young people, but they need more training. They need more maturity. What I'm seeing is just a display of chaotic behavior. It was so bad that even Corps Master Barry had to put out a statement across the nation that the DC is better than this. And I think we are better than this, and we have to use seasoned leadership that's still youthful. I'm still youthful. I still got great ideas to implement to help our folks. And especially at the end of the day, education is the key. But you need public safety because we have to be safe in our neighborhoods. We have to be safe in our schools. We have to be safe when we go to our jobs. But also, we need those 25 to 30 million people coming to the city on an annual basis. They're not going to come if they can't go to the Navy Yard, if they can't go down to Southwest to the wharf, if they can't go to the baseball game, they can't go to the football game without being scared. When you saw what happened at Chipotle, scared the death out of those families that were up in there. And that's the vision that goes across this nation. And now this council is talking about you don't want to have curfews. That's not the answer. But right now we have to put those curfews in place until we get the answer and create a solution. So I'll end by saying, as it relates to safety, prevention, if possible, enforcement, if necessary, but opportunity for all. You can take a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. Vincent Orange is going to give you pathways. You must take one of those pathways, but we will not tolerate crime.
Candidate Vincent Orange, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you so much, my AK sisters. Love you all. Take care.
And we ask that you stay with us. We will have more candid conversations from the DC mayoral candidates after a break.
Thank you. Your voice, your vote, your district. Election day is just 5 days away. The future of the District of Columbia will be shaped by the people who participate. Whether or not this is your first time voting or your 15th, every vote helps strengthen our democracy and ensure that community voices are heard. Take time now to review your ballot, make a plan to vote, and learn about the voting process. This election also marks the district's first use of ranked choice voting, making voter education more important than ever. Don't wait until the last minute. Make your plan, cast your ballot, encourage your family, friends, and neighbors to do the same. Your voice matters. Your vote matters. Washington, D.C. is counting on you.
Back now with more candid conversations with DC mayoral candidates. And joining us now is candidate Rini Sampath. Thank you, candidate Sampath, for joining us today for Candid Conversations. Voters across the district are looking for leadership that can unite communities, address long-standing challenges, and deliver real results for residents in every ward. So we have a few questions for you, including one from community members. And I'd like to start with talking about mental health and Black youth suicide. Communities across the country, including here in Washington, D.C., are confronting a growing youth mental health crisis with increasing concern about anxiety, depression, trauma, suicide among young people. And Black youth in particular are experiencing rising rates of suicidal ideation and suicide attempts, while often facing barriers to culturally competent mental health care, school-based support, and early intervention services. Families, educators, faith leaders, and community organizations are calling for a more coordinated and proactive response that prioritizes prevention, access, and stigma reduction. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated has consistently emphasized health equity, youth development, and strengthening families and communities through advocacy and service. So the question, what specific steps will your administration take to address the mental health crises affecting Black youth in Washington, D.C., including rising suicide rates? And how will you ensure that young people and their families have access to culturally responsive mental health services, prevention programs, and crisis support?
Thank you, Ms. Thomas, for having me and for the chapter for having me as well. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you all. And I really appreciate this question. I'll start there. My favorite aspect of the campaign, one of my favorite aspects has certainly been meeting with our young people. One of my favorite forums of the 18 plus forums that I've maybe been to since this campaign started was the youth-led forum, the Mayoral forum hosted by our young people at Trinity, Washington. And they asked a similar question. And in doing research for that particular forum, I recalled one of the most shocking statistics I read was that our Black youth are 3 times as more likely to commit as opposed to the young white or even brown youth that we have in the city. And so this disparity, this statistic that we have is not one that I take lightly. I am one who's very data driven, but every time I see a data point or a statistic, I think of those individuals, the individual families, the stories behind those really chilling statistics. And so I want to start there. That's something that really animated me, moved me. And then I have to talk, of course, about the DC government failure when it comes to addressing the mental health crisis in DC. So I have an administrative and operational background. I've been a chief of staff over a 400-person organization. I'm a director at a cybersecurity company today. And one of the things that has disappointed me so much about DC government is their execution abilities. I think DC government fundamentally has an execution problem. And one of the ways I can show for that is that DC government committed in previous years to having at least one mental health counselor in every single public school. And that simply never happened. This was a commitment that was set forth. And instead, what we do have is a plus up of school resource officers, which very, very ardently oppose, because I think the presence of armed resource officers as opposed to mental health professionals that are equipped with diversity and equity inclusion training, who have the capacity to support our young people, is just further exacerbating this particular issue. So commitment that you would have for me as mayor, as a government leader, is to focus on this from an administrative operational lens, where if I make the commitment of increasing funding for mental health counselors in schools, we actually make it happen by appointing the right agency heads in place. I'll give you another example. DCPS at one point spent $274 million in vendors and contracts without any council oversight, and one DCPS contract specialist was sent to prison for kickback schemes. And so the money that we invest in things like this have to be going to the right places, so that we actually have the proper outcomes for our young people, and an issue as serious as suicide in our Black youth is actually taken care of.
Okay, thank you for that. I want to switch now to an issue that I think affects everyone in the district, and that's transportation. Transportation remains one of the most debated issues in Washington, from bike lanes and dedicated bus lanes to concerns about traffic, affordability, and access, equitable access across all 8 wards. So this question is, as mayor, how would you balance the need for safer, more reliable transportation options with concerns about congestion, and one of my personal favorites, parking? And what specific steps would you take to ensure transportation in DC is affordable, accessible, and works for residents regardless of where they live or how they get around the city?
I first and foremost believe transportation is an equity and justice issue. It's, my campaign slogan has been fix the basics, and I have been hammering home since I decided to jump into this race about only 3 months ago. And the reason I jumped in was because of the snowstorm, and I went to council, I testified, I listened to an individual say that they were trapped in their home for 16 days because 311 never answered their calls. They're a wheelchair user, and they never shoveled the snow outside of their home, so they couldn't navigate the streets and sidewalks safely and get to where they need to go. And so I look at transportation as an equity and justice issue. It allows people to earn an income. It allows you to have a better quality of life. And the way that I see it is I would focus on a couple of different things. First, it's going to be safer streets. So we need to fix our dangerous intersections. We have to improve crosswalks. We have to improve lighting. We have to make sidewalks accessible. A fun statistic I like to share with folks to just show them, again, the execution problem that DC government has. Our own internal benchmarks for sidewalk repair is 275 days. And so in a true high-performing organization, you would never have such poor benchmarks to begin with, because that affects your organizational performance when your standards are so low. So those are easy fixes that I can make as mayor, as a true administrator and operator, in order to improve the quality of life for our residents. So obviously we'll start there with the safer streets. The next thing that comes to mind is reliable transit. WMATA does not have a dedicated funding source, and I believe that that affects our transit delays that we see more heavily in especially Ward 7 and 8. I've talked to several residents who say that they have to resort to Uber, and Ubering is extremely expensive. That affects your affordability crisis in DC. And so if we actually have reliable transit, a reliable funding stream for transit, we would absolutely be able to improve people's quality of life in that way. Third, I also want to see better execution from DDOT. I mean, the fact that constituent services are really lacking from the career politicians we do have in the race, and if residents have to beg to get a stop sign, or have to beg to get a bus lane or a bike lane put in place, these are performance issues that I think must be cracked down on in a new administration, so that, again, residents' quality of life improves. And then I do want to also address that question around how do you balance this with parking, and making sure that also our users who use cars to get around can also have a safe way to get around DC. I think that is going to come down entirely to a matter of understanding constituent concerns. There are going to be areas in the city where majority of residents would prefer a more walkable, bikeable, bus-friendly area. And there may be parts of the city where we have a lot of car users, and those individuals would prefer more parking spots. So I think it's a matter of, again, using our data and using real understanding of what residents' needs are before making blanket decisions that then upset, the long-term residents that have perhaps been there and are seeking a particular standard of life.
Okay. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a question from the community, and I'll read that now. But first, we know that you bring, as you mentioned, a background in cybersecurity, technology, and advocacy leadership that many voters see as fresh and innovative. However, some residents may question whether you have enough direct municipal governance and executive management experience to lead a complex city government facing challenges related to public safety, education, housing, and economic equality. And Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated has long emphasized leadership, accountability, and community centered solutions that produce real outcomes for families and neighborhoods. So, the question from the community is, what specific experiences have prepared you to manage the operational demands of city government on day one? And how would you ensure that innovative ideas translate into tangible improvements for Black families, women, and underserved communities across DC?
Absolutely. I love this question because I also think it's the right question that voters should be asking. I think every single individual who runs for mayor needs to be looked at closely because it's honestly the probably toughest job interview one could have, running for office. You're held accountable to people, and that's the beauty of democracy. And so I will share that my personal background as administrator, operator has been since the beginning of my career. So just walking through, the start of my professional career to where I'm at now, because I think it would be important for voters to hear this. One of my proudest accomplishments, and I think the start of my interest in any type of public service, I was the first woman student body president elected in a decade, and the first dual woman ticket to win in Pac-12 history at the University of Southern California. My running mate, a Black woman, me, an Indian American immigrant, and that was just historic. And so we were able to do so much by simply reminding people that, yes, we may not be traditionally what the University of Southern California has seen, but we were able to deliver free Uber service for all students during our tenure. We were able to develop an initiative that ultimately led to the first ever Race and Equity Center at the University of Southern California. So there's just so much that we were proud of. And I'll also share that I also was one of the lead architects of a petition that led to the university president stepping down amidst the largest sex crime scandal in Los Angeles history. So I have a history of community activism and advocacy, and I know just what it takes to get things done for people who need it the most, simply put. And so over time from there, I was a field organizer on a presidential campaign. I went to a nonprofit to work in higher education. I worked closely with the Obama White House, the Secretary of Education at the time, to publish initiatives that supported our young people. And then eventually I went into technology consulting, which is where I've been. And I think it's really challenged me. I've had to hire people. I've had to manage budgets. I've had to lead initiatives. And it's all been in the context of the federal government. And while it's different than municipal and local governance, it's taught me so much about what it means to think creatively, innovatively. And I think that kind of a background, this kind of complex but diverse background of both public advocacy, but also technology, is what has led me to ultimately see the failures of our DC government and decide, you know what, being a private citizen was nice, but I need to step up, especially in light of the Trump administration, of this White House, with what's going on, for my generation to step up and say, it's now our time to take this on, to lead and do whatever we can to make our society better. And so my campaign is made up entirely of volunteers, a lot of young people who want to see change. We actually redesigned the 311 application. You can go on the website, rainyformayor.com/311. It is a prototype prototype application. Right now, DC's 311 app actually does not work. It's completely dysfunctional and inaccessible, and we coded that app in the matter of a couple of days. Another example, we kept hearing the frustration from residents that they don't know where their tax dollars are going. So we took all of the publicly available data and created a tax dashboard that you can access also on the website. And third, it's actually a completely working feature because we heard from small business owners how hard it is to open up and keep a business open here, whether you're running Roaming Rooster and now have 7 franchise locations, which is my favorite, one of my favorite restaurants in DC, or you're, a budding entrepreneur who's never opened up a business before. And so we built a small business permitting concierge. And my hope is with some of these innovations, I can show folks that even if I have never run for elected office, even if I've never been in the public eye for the past 10 or so years, I am fully committed to using this type of technology and creativity to actually solve our DC resident problems. So I hope in that way to serve DC. Absolutely, and I'm excited to be here.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Rini Sampath, candidate for mayor, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for having me. Hope to see you all soon.
And we continue our candid conversations with mayoral candidates for Washington, D.C., and we're joined next by candidate Gary Goodweather. Thank you, Mr. Goodweather, for joining us this evening for Candid Conversations. Voters across the district are looking for leadership that can unite communities, address longstanding challenges, and deliver real results for residents in every ward. So we have a few questions for you this evening, including one from the community. But I would like to begin, if I may, to start with a question regarding public safety, equity, and trust in government. So across the district, residents are asking for safer neighborhoods, more responsive city services, stronger educational and mental health support systems, and greater confidence that every community is receiving equal attention and investment. Many Washingtonians want solutions that both reduce violence and strengthen trust between residents and city government, especially in communities that have historically felt overlooked or under-resourced. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated has long advocated for social justice, civil engagement, educational opportunity, and policies that uplift underserved communities. So the question, how will you make Washington, D.C. safer and more just while strengthening trust between communities and city government? And what measurable steps will your administration take to ensure every ward feels equally protected, invested in, and heard?
Thank you for the question. And by the way, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Perfect. And thank you for having me today. We have to rebuild trust in our communities, and it starts with trust with our police force. And as part of one of the first things that I'm going to do when I'm mayor is create it's called the Capital Corps, which is a transformational workforce development program that I modeled actually after my time in the U.S. military, after Miracle, after Marionberry's summer jobs program, and an organization called City Year that I've worked with. And as part of that, it has a civic branch, and that will help create the pipeline of police officers that we need to be able to staff our city and be able to make sure that they are in our communities, so that the investment in our police force, that they are there, they are subject matter experts. Everyone I'm going to appoint are subject matter experts, and they are mission driven. That includes ultimately the chief of police, who will be an subject matter expert, and someone that understands that their mission is to serve and to protect Black residents, every resident in Washington, D.C., as well as I believe that police officers should have the ability to serve in the communities that they live in. Number one, that to me really is truly community policing. Number two is that in my office, I will have an office of inclusion, and I am elevating the ANCs, the office of the ANC, from under council to under my office. That way, it gives not just DC residents and residents from Black communities, a direct line of communication to me. It also gives me the ability to make sure that I am communicating directly with residents, so that they everything that we are doing, they can see and be a part of, as well as to be able to create growth for our communities, our Black communities. I'm creating a venture fund in Washington, D.C., and I've spent the past 16 months running now to be of service to our city, to serve our city. And just yesterday, my campaign chairperson and I went to this, we were invited to Dunbar High School to be able to listen to this pilot program called Learn and Earn. And I say it was fascinating. The youth were engaged. Just that program, they said attendance went up 62%. And I still got to dig in to understand how that program was operated. But it was, what I heard was a few things. Number one is that the youth want to be heard from, right? They want to be engaged. Number two is that as part of this program, they wanted investment directly into them. And that is partly, and they gave these pitches for business ideas. And every single one of the business idea was a way to be able to improve the neighborhood in one way or the community, stop violence, and be able to have their communities uplifted. That is exactly what we are looking to do, is to be able to invest directly in our communities through our venture fund and directly in the Black communities.
Okay. I want to shift gears just slightly to talk about statehood and the federal government. Washington's, as you already know, unique relationship with the federal government creates both opportunities and challenges, from congressional oversight and budget autonomy to public safety, federal land use, and ongoing debate, of course, over DC statehood. So the question is, what is your vision for the district's relationship with the federal government? And how would you advocate for greater local autonomy while maintaining productive partnerships with federal leaders and agencies?
Yeah, first thing I just want to say is I'm a former United States Army officer.
And thank you for your service.
And I took an oath to the Constitution to serve all Americans. When I am mayor, I will take another oath, and that is to protect every DC resident, and I mean every DC resident, including our every Black, brown resident in our city. Number one, to be able to ensure that we not only can maintain the autonomy we have, but get more, is one of the biggest parts of being mayor is the budget, and ensuring that the budget is balanced, which we have to do by law, as well as that it is effective for our residents. And our spending has gone up, continues to go up. Our economy is down 8.3%. My job will be to create a budget that works for DC residents, and make sure that we have in DC what's called the 7 deadly sins under Home Rule, affectionately called the 7 deadly sins under the Home Rule Act. If we breach any of them, then the Financial Control Board automatically comes in, and Trump can appoint the overseers, and we lose more. Number one, have an effective budget. Then I can work with Congress to be able to get financial autonomy for us. Second part is to be able to get more autonomy over our judicial system. We actually have been talked to different judges to be able to get, in the interim, more administrative judges to be able to get through the system. Look, I'm absolutely for statehood. I will say that we are going to do all this simultaneously, because ultimately it's incomprehensible to me that 700,000 of us do not have full representation. I'll stop with this. I was at a meeting a few weeks ago, and managing partner of this major law firm said, Gary, we have all these resources within and all DC residents within our bunch of DC residents within our firm, and we can help with this administration, and we can help both suing, but working with the administration and working with Congress and all of our clients. And I said, well, why haven't you? And he said, we've never been asked. And I said, I am asking you. I'm asking for your help. Utilize all those incredible resources that you have to be able to help me get more for DC residents, get more for our communities.
Okay, definitely a tightrope there. So now, as I mentioned, we do have questions that we received from the community. So we do have one for you. As a real estate developer and business executive, you've emphasized economic development and operational efficiency in your campaign. However, some residents and housing advocates worry that a development-focused approach could prioritize growth and investment without protecting affordability, community stability, and the needs of longtime Black residents facing displacement pressures. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated has consistently advocated for equitable economic development, housing stability, and policies that strengthen Black families and communities rather than displacing them. So the question is, how would you ensure that economic development and redevelopment efforts under your administration directly benefit longtime residents, especially Black families and women-owned businesses, instead of accelerating displacement and widening inequality?
I appreciate that, and I'm extraordinarily sensitive to it. It is, number one is that the way that we do it, it's a myth that you can't have growth in a community and development, real estate development, and have to displace. It's just not true. It's how you do it. The first thing is that we do it by building, whether it is buildings, real estate, ownership, or businesses with the residents themselves. And one example of this is that recently, or a couple months ago, I attended the Black Business Task Force meeting, and I was talking about the CB and MBE programs. And right now, 90% of those dollars go to 10% of the firms. And two women came up to me afterwards and said, we've been certified for one that had 2 years, one for 5 years, advanced degrees, so they've never received a single dollar. So that I wish I'd had that conversation before I went to the forum. But what I learned from it was that the way that these programs are being administered aren't really working. So that we are going to do it, so I sort of referred to previously, is directly invest in businesses and residents in Black communities in their communities, so that every dollar that is invested is going directly to the Black business owners, Black residents, whatever it may be. Also, I think it's important to note that we part of this, to be able to ensure that people aren't displaced, to ensure that there is economic growth, is that we are lifting up all communities. We are celebrating the culture and the heritage and the history in those communities as part of the advancement. I have built real estate in this built homes in this city. I built hotels, and I can tell you from experience, the way that it is done now, it is not being effective for our Black communities, and that is going to change under my administration.
Okay, we will leave it there. We thank you so much for your time, candidate Gary Goodweather. Thank you for joining us this evening.
I appreciate it incredibly much, and if I may just leave you with one thing, is that I am running because I want to serve you, because I want to serve your communities, and I will be honored. I will be honored for you to rank me number one, and I'll be honored to serve you when I am mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we continue our candid conversations now with mayoral candidates. Joining us now is candidate Ernest Johnson. And thank you, Mr. Johnson, for joining us this evening for Candid Conversations. Voters across the district are looking for leadership that can unite communities, address longstanding challenges, and deliver real results for residents in every ward. So we do have a couple of questions for you this evening, including one from members of our community. So we'll get started. First, I want to discuss Black maternal health and maternal mortality. As you may know, Black women in the United States continue to experience disproportionately high rates of maternal mortality and severe maternal health complications, regardless of income or educational level. In Washington, D.C., longstanding disparities in healthcare access, prenatal support, mental health services, and postpartum care have heightened concerns about outcomes for Black mothers and infants, and residents and advocates are increasingly calling for maternal health policies that center equity, accountability, and comprehensive care before, during, and after pregnancy. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated has long advocated for health equity, women's wellness, and policies that improve outcomes for Black women and families. So the related question is, what comprehensive strategy will your administration implement to reduce Black maternal mortality and improve maternal health outcomes in Washington, D.C.? And how will you ensure equitable access to quality prenatal, postpartum, and mental health care for Black women across all wards in the district?
Well, Jennifer, thank you so very much for your question. I appreciate the AKA Divine Nine's invite to participate in this forum. Number one, thank you. I certainly appreciate it. And I do want to apologize. So I do have a quick question before I respond to you. I've been so busy. I came in early. I was, trying to make sure that I'm attending all of these different events, honestly. So if you could just remind me of our ground rules. How long is the interview? How long do I have to respond? And those things. I did not have a chance to go, oh, you sent it. I don't want anybody to think that I said it.
That
I
is
just
quite
haven't had a
okay.
chance to review it.
That is okay. We have 15 minutes. Of course, our little clock is ticking on that, but we have 15 minutes. So hopefully, depending on our time, we can get in 2 to 3 questions. It just depends on your responses, and I'll be ready to roll with you. So I will let you just pick up from there.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd just like to reintroduce myself. I am Ernest Johnson. I am a native Washingtonian. I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in mathematics from the University of Maryland and a graduate degree from Harvard University in government. I have the honor and privilege of managing Marion Barry's first mayoral campaign. He appointed me as director of the DC Apprenticeship Council shortly thereafter. I have worked with 2 former presidents of the United States, President Jimmy Carter, as well as President Richard Nixon. I'm as a native, I just know the history of the city, and having worked with one of the most dynamic mayors in the city, I just have a different energy and a different perspective that I kind of bring to all of these issues. In terms of infant mortality rates, healthcare disparities, not just for Black women, but for the Black community in general. It is certainly a major crisis because our community has to deal with and bear so much economic stress, so much relationship stress. And our most recent data and statistics are pointing that Generation Z and Generation Gen X are mostly single parent mothers. This is not boding well for our community. We certainly need to get back to full family representations. You need 2 household incomes to really be productive and effective in this community, just to relieve some of the stress. In terms of addressing mental health as well as maternal health care, one of the things I've been reviewing is the Department of Behavioral Health budget and its financing, its allocation of its resources. It has a budget of between $600 and $800 million. It has 1,500 full-time employees. However, it has a contract of about 1,000 employees. Their major responsibility is operating our mental health facility, St. Elizabeth in Southeast. but the subcontractors and the contractors, the 9,000 employees that they have, is something that I certainly want to review. As a native Washingtonian, my son was born in Columbia Hospital. My daughter was born in the Greater Southeast Hospital, not the medical center, not the new one, the old one where you had to just pray that everything went well in there. The Greater Southeast, the third one before the one that we have now. So I am very familiar with these health outcomes and disparity. And as the next mayor of the District of Columbia with some historical perspectives, these are things that I'll be calling on your organization and others to sit down with on how effectively to address all of these things. I do not go in as mayor thinking I am the know-all and be-all of everything. I am a good listener, Marion Burry, the ground, always communicate with the residents, and you'll always be well informed. That is my approach to every issue, personal knowledge, my historical knowledge, and from working with probably a member that's ever been on the city council and every mayor of the District of Columbia. So I'm just thoroughly versed with the issues, and I'm just ready to go and just bring to the forefront some of the issues that I found since I've been running for mayor.
Well, being that you are a native Washingtonian, this issue that I want to talk about now is something that I'm sure you're all too familiar with, and that is transportation. And it remains one of the most debated issues in Washington, from bike lanes and dedicated bus lanes to concerns about traffic, affordability, and of course, transportation equity across all 8 wards in the district. So as mayor, how would you balance the need for safer, more reliable transportation options with concerns about congestion? And one thing I'm all too familiar with, parking. And what specific steps would you take to ensure transportation in DC is affordable, accessible, and works for residents regardless of where they live or how they get around the city?
Well, one of the things, and I really hate discussing personnel changes, but I obviously have to immediately look at the Department of Transportation. Its rollout of bike lanes has been, I think, a complete disaster. Riding bike lanes and having bike lanes is appropriate. Well, we spent almost $2 billion rolling them out, and they were not rolled out in consideration of neighborhoods, of seniors who have metro access, and other things that can no longer even get to the curbs because of the bike lanes. And now we have traffic, rush hour traffic all day. It's not just sometimes, it's just completely. And so the Department of Transportation has to have a thorough review. I'm an honest, authentic candidate. I'm going to roll back some of these bike lanes there in some of the worst neighborhoods and some of the worst places. I also am going to require some level of identification in terms of tags and insurance for some of these bikes and motor scooters. Some of our seniors have been hit, knocked down, and excuse me for knocking an 82-year-old person to the ground on a bike is just not going to cut it in this administration. Honestly, the metro we have is one of the cleanest in the country. I do appreciate the cleanliness. They've been cleaning up a lot of the issues like broken escalators and whatnot that they have. It is extremely hard to get a profitable transportation system anywhere in the country, but we have to make sure that Maryland and Virginia are paying their fair share. We just got rid of that $1 ride along, and I don't know why we did. The name escapes me. I don't know why we did that. I know, speaking to Vince Gray about the trolley tracks that were put over there on 8th Street, it was just a complete disaster. I asked him not to do it. It was 800 million waste. It really was. And it was just a train to nowhere. And so Jennifer and the rest of the AKAs, our issue is leadership. That is what we're missing in all of our departments. There's absolutely no accountability. We have acquired the worst reputation that I've ever seen in Washington, D.C. Nobody's holding these developers, lobbyists, and special interests accountable. Our money, $22 billion budget, is going everywhere but where it should go. We are building affordable housing. We're building it in Canada. We are supporting restaurants. Yeah, the ones in Miami. we are spending our budget to support rappers in Atlanta. So that is a major problem. And you have to have, and I say this at all of the debates, I question all of the candidates, you have to have a certain amount of public courage in order to be mayor when there is a 22 billion involved. This is not about being cute. This is not about who has the most titles, who's raised the most money. Do you have the courage to put residents before special interests? If you do not, and I have employed a number of people, you should really withdraw from the race, because right now what we are facing, if these two special interest candidates are almost elected, we won't even recognize the District of Columbia in 4 years. We don't have 4 years to waste. We really do not. I have called for the resignation of the public service commissioners because of our utility rates, that they allow PEPCO to raise those rates entirely too high. The DC Court of Appeals has agreed with me and have ruled that the PEPCO rate increases are going to have to be refunded to residents because they were erroneously approved by the Public Service Commission. I
Now
hope
we
that
have,
wasn't too much, but I got a lot.
well, I have one more question from the community that I'd like to give you a chance. We only have a few minutes, so we'll have
Sure.
to keep it relatively short.
Okay.
But this question, as a candidate, of course, you've spoken about the importance of community-centered leadership, economic opportunity, and improving the quality of life for DC residents. But at the same time, many voters are asking how the next mayor will balance bold ideas with practical governments, particularly around public safety, economic growth, housing affordability, and restoring confidence in city services. Women of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated are especially invested in leadership that promotes equity, accountability, and measurable progress for families and communities throughout the district. So we were given this question for you. How would you demonstrate to residents across all 8 wards that your administration can build broad partnerships, govern effectively, and deliver measurable improvements in public safety, economic opportunity, and essential city services for all DC residents? Now, I know that was a lot, but we just have a couple minutes.
Not a problem. I'm going to try to run through these really quick for you because we've really been kind of like working on a number of these issues. So the first thing in terms of public safety, I am going to bring our MPD training back from overseas, and we're going to reestablish them at the Edwards Air Force Base. I think that it was a mistake having them trained over in Israel. I think that we need to bring an end to that, and I want them to be experts in the use of non-lethal force. Also, our officers have a certain amount of stress and family relationship issues that they need to be able to deal with in confidence. And that's one of the reasons I want to bring that back to the Andrews Air Force Base so that they can receive the support that they need as well. We have an outstanding MPD. They just need leadership, and that's what they have been lacking. In terms of affordable housing, one of the things I'm going to do is get with Kathy Patterson, our city auditor. She may need to bring in some resources. We're going to audit the last 36 months of commercial developments, those people who have received subsidies or tax abatements or credits. If you have not complied with our first social agreement laws in terms of hiring DC residents, you have not provided the 30% set-asides, we're going to revoke those funds back to our general funds. And going forward, I am going to use more nonprofit developers instead of the developers who have failed to keep their words. After receiving almost $30 billion over 10 years, we should not have an affordability housing crisis. We should not have double-digit unemployment in wards 5, 7, and 8. Finally, I'm going to renegotiate the RFK redevelopment deal. That is currently a $1.3 billion giveaway. I already have the law firm of Arnold & Porter on deck. We are going to buy out the minority owners, Matthew Johnson, and love it. I'm giving them a 10% return on the investment. Taxpayers are going to own 26% of the team. We are going to get the stadium built. We're going to be owners, not just rooting as fans for some jobs and some so-called affordable housing. Also, with this agreement, you will have what is known as tag-along rights. So if the team is ever sold 10, 15 years in the future, DC residents will get 26% of the value of the franchise at that time. And if anybody knows about NFL franchises, their value is not about to decrease anytime soon. So that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to working with as well. But these are wealth growing opportunities that we just cannot continue to waste, that we just not continue to miss.
Okay, and we will leave it there. We thank you so much, Candidate Ernest Johnson. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you so much. Early voting is June the 8th. Let's get out and do it. And you know, I got all the major endorsements. You check me out on social media. I know y'all see him. I know y'all see him rolling in. Don't act like you don't. You know who the man is here. You know who the man stepping into the gap. All right. Roll on with me, sis. I'm telling you, we love it. We're going to get it done. We really do. And you see the Spirit. The Holy Spirit is right here. Don't let your eyes fool you. You see what you see. You know what you know. Thank you so much for your invite. I appreciate it. And I'm always here for you. Reach out to me anytime with any questions or any need of support.
Thank you again so much. And now I would like to send it back to Megan Moore, who's going to share some very important information for us. Hi, Megan.
Hi, thank you, Jennifer. Really enjoying this evening's forum. So before we officially conclude today's program, we want to ensure that everyone leaves not only informed about the candidates and the issues, but also confident in understanding the voting process itself. As Washington, D.C. voters continue adapting to ranked choice voting, voter education remains critically important to ensuring every voice is fully heard and every ballot is cast effectively. Understanding how ranked choice voting works empowers voters to participate with clarity and confidence on Election Day. We are so grateful for our partners at Rank the District and their outgoing efforts to educate and engage the community around voter participation and the election process. We also want to extend a special thanks to Kenyatta Smith for joining us this evening to provide a refresher and a helpful guide to help us through the ranked choice voting process. Please join me in welcoming Kenyatta Smith and Grow Democracy DC Civic Education Fund.
I am here with Rank the District, and ranked choice voting is here in DC. Our mail-in ballots were mailed in on May 11th. Early voting starts on June 8th. And the primary election day is on June 16th. Some of you all might ask, how did we get here? On January 2024, Initiative 83 began collecting signatures. And what is Initiative 83? Initiative 83 was an initiative that was two parts. It was part ranked choice voting, part semi-open primaries for independent voters. In 2024, 73% of DC voters voted yes on 83. DC Council funded one part of Initiative 83, which was ranked choice voting. And this year, in our June 2026 election, we will be using ranked choice voting in DC for the first time. Why our organization thinks ranked choice voting is important? We think it's to give more voices for our voters. You get to vote for rank 5 candidates versus the one. So you get to vote for your favorite and have some backups to support your favorite choice. And it also creates a more positive campaigning. I mean, this campaign season has been really aggressive in certain races, but with ranked choice voting, we also have seen a little coalition building between candidates. For example, in Ward 1, Rashida and Miguel are working collectively to say, rank me second. If you rank Rashida's second, and then possibly rank Miguel second for Rashida's supporters. But my favorite reason for using ranked choice voting, because we make sure candidates win by the majority of over 50%, and they're not winning by the plurality. A lot of times candidates win by 18, 25, 27%. That's not majority of the vote. So ranked choice voting makes sure that your voice is being heard, and it gives more power to the voters. Now let's see how ranked choice voting works. In a ranked choice voting election, a candidate must win by over 50%. If a candidate wins by over 50% in the first round, there's no ranking. But if they do not, that's when the ranking comes into play. So you're going to vote your favorite candidate first. Second, you're going to rank your backup choices, your second, third, fourth, or fifth. You do not have to use all of your backup choices. You only rank the candidates that you support. If your first choice loses, which is in last place, that means that your vote simply moves to your next choice. This repeats itself until a candidate wins with over 50%. Now, if we take a moment and look at this mock ballot to the right, we are using Motown artists as our candidates. This voter chose the Jackson 5s as their first choice, Diana Ross as their second, and the Temptations as their third, Marvin Gaye as their fourth, and Gladys Knight as their Gladys Knight in the Pips. Excuse me, let me not forget her backup. Gladys Knight in the Pips as her 5th choice. Now, if the Jackson Fives were eliminated in the first round, this voter's vote would simply move to Diana Ross. But now, if Diana Ross was eliminated in the first round, which was her 2nd choice, her first choice would stay. Now, but if the Jackson Fives were eliminated in the 2nd round, her vote would move to her 3rd choice, which was the Temptations, which is her next choice. So again, your vote stays in your first choice unless they are eliminated, and then it moves to your next choice. What not to do. You don't want to choose more than one candidate in the same column. You don't want to rank a candidate more than once. When you rank a candidate more than once, it's called bullet voting, and that's just equivalent to one vote. So if you, for example, rank Diana Ross 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, it looks like you voted for one person, one candidate. Skipping. Now, skipping is a tricky one. Skipping is allowed, but it's best to rank in order. So if you do rank your first choice, skip your 2nd choice, and move on to your 3rd choice, your votes would simply move up. So your 3rd choice will become your 2nd choice, and so on. So we want to keep it very simple. You want to rank your favorite candidate first. You want to rank your backups in order, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th if you choose. You do not have to use all of your rankings. And if you like, you can only rank one, your favorite. I suggest that you rank at least 2 candidates, just in case your first choice is eliminated. With this, you'll make sure that your that contest is not exhausted and your vote has more time in the race. That's how you rank. Thank you all for your time, and remember, this is just an additional support to our traditional way. I like to say that. Again, you can vote for your favorite and only that. And these are some of your backups. Just support your favorite candidate. Thank you.
We now continue our candid conversations with candidates for the DC mayoral position with candidate Janice Lewis George. Thank you, Councilwoman George, for joining us tonight for this candid conversation. Now, voters across the district are looking for leadership that can unite communities, address longstanding challenges, and deliver real results for residents in every ward. So we'll begin now with talking about education, youth opportunity, and the future of DC. Many DC families are deeply concerned about future opportunities available to young people across the district. Persistent disparities in educational outcomes, youth violence, workforce readiness, and access to enrichment programs continue to impact communities differently depending on the zip code and the ward. Residents are also looking for stronger coordination between schools, workforce development, public safety, and community organizations to ensure that young people are prepared to thrive in college, careers, and in civic life. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated has long prioritized educational advancement, mentorship, leadership development, and investing in the next generation as essential to building strong communities. So the question, what is your administration's plan to expand educational equity and create clear pathways for DC youth to succeed in school, careers, entrepreneurship, and public service, regardless of the ward, neighborhood, socioeconomic background?
Thank you so much. As many people know, I am a proud graduate of DC Public Schools, and I was proud to be able to attend Rudolph Elementary, Alice Deal Middle School, as well as School Without Walls Senior High School. And many people know that I talk about leaving Rudolph Elementary School and going to Deal. And I remember seeing just a stark difference in access to education and opportunity, and feeling that this city was giving more opportunity to people based on where they lived. And that experience is what led me to be a champion for education in our city, even at a young age, where I served as student representative on the DC Board of Education. But it also made me go and lead to actually studying that in college. And one of the things I studied was the school to prison pipeline. And what we found in that was that, listen, if kids have low behavior, low attendance, low math, and low reading scores, any of those three, they're more likely to drop out of school and end up in the school to prison pipeline. So if we know the factors that are being utilized utilize to build prisons, we also know the factors that we can reverse to actually make sure our young people succeed. My plan for education is this. I want to make sure first we address chronic absenteeism on day one. More than 60% of our students are not in school. We can't close our math and literacy gaps if we're not addressing absenteeism. My plan is to address it on day one by assigning one agency to dealing with chronic absenteeism, not the 5 current agencies that deal with this persistent issue. My plan is also to invest in doing home visiting. This is an evidence-based strategy we know that works to actually reduce chronic absenteeism. That is when young people are not in school, there is someone who shows up to their house and asks the parent, your child was not in school, why were you not here? Adding in real parent accountability, and to the student to say, you're not here, why are you not here? And for those families who are struggling, we're happy to connect them with our family collaboratives. As you know, here in DC, we have a collaborative in every ward in this city who is ready to support families who need that additional support. And we have a school system that's ready to hold people accountable if young people are not in school. So chronic absenteeism is critical. We also have to close our math and literacy gaps. As you know, our Black and white students are still comparing things differently as it relates to math and reading. And so we want to actually ensure that we're implementing our literacy task force recommendations, which talk about high impact tutoring, which also invest in making sure we are training our teachers with the supports they need. And the same for math. We know that those are things that are critical, and high impact tutoring can have a real impact on that. We also know that we have failed as a city at special education. And that's something that people don't want to talk about, but is real. We have taken a reactive approach to special education instead of proactive. My plan is to we have enough special education teachers in the classroom that they are paid the salaries that keep them and retain them in our classrooms, and that we give them the extra support needed in their classrooms to succeed, and also give our general education teachers the training and support they need to be able to execute kids' individualized education plans so that they don't have to be out of the classroom, but can be taught in a least restrictive environment. And lastly, I think it's important to address the middle school gap that exists in our city as well as high school. That means that in Ward 7, particularly Wards 8, we know that there's a middle school gap where they have to travel across the city to get their child to a by right middle school. In Ward 7, for example, we have an opportunity with Winston Education Campus to bring a real middle school to Ward 7 that has the same programming that the elementary schools have. But across the city, we know that many of our families want bilingual education. They want dual language programming. They want STEM programming. They want STEAM programming. And so we want to make that consistent throughout the middle school years. We also want to partner with our labor unions. Many students don't hear about apprenticeships till 12th grade. By then, it's oftentimes too late and they're not qualified to enter those apprenticeships. So we want to start the journey for apprenticeships in 6th grade. That means kids get the opportunity to learn how they can become an electrician, a carpenter, how they can get into the trades. And they will learn the education requirements that are necessary, but the physical requirements that are necessary. So they often won't make the choice to smoke weed and do other things that actually could hinder their opportunity to enter these apprenticeship programs. If we start as early as 6th grade, we start to teach them the habits and the responsibility and the requirements they're going to need to actually have a future ahead of them. But not just for our students who are not going to do to college, we also want to help our gifted and talented students. And what I want to do is be able to use our universities to open the door to young people getting associate's degrees before they graduate from high school. Here in Ward 4 at Coolidge and Roosevelt, and the responsibility and the requirements they're going to need to actually have a future ahead of them. But not just for our students who are not going to do to college, we also want to help our gifted and talented students. And what I want to do is be able to use our universities to open the door to young people getting associate's degrees before they graduate from high school. Here in Ward 4 at Coolidge and Roosevelt, our students are graduating with associate's degrees from Trinity University before they even walk across the stage. As a School Without Walls student, we had the opportunity to take classes at George Washington University. DC is a university town, and we want to use our universities to be able to give our students a leg up, which is an associate's degree before they graduate, which helps with the cost of college, but also helps us improve the rate of our students who are actually graduating from college, which is really low. So that is my plan around education. And we know that education isn't just in the classroom, but it's outside the classroom. So we have to invest in arts and music and sports, because we know those are things that actually bring students to the classroom and make them consistent learners and actually invest in education overall. So we want to invest in that. And we also know after school programming is key. I was a DC scores kid. I was an upward bound kid. I was a higher achievement kid. I never had an opportunity to do anything else. I was in line at Murray's signing up for my summer youth employment job every single summer. It was my responsibility. We have to get back to a place where we have robust after school programming, summer and spring programming for our kids. And we have to expand summer youth employment across the year so kids can earn as they learn. And that's a comprehensive approach to dealing with young people and looking at education in a holistic manner, as well as recognizing education starts not just when they enter pre-K3, but from birth to 3, which is why my plan for universal access to childcare is also tied into my plan for education, because development starts early and we need to get in there early to make sure kids are getting the development skills they need at a very early age to be able to be successful throughout their life.
Well, just a quick follow-up question before we take a question from the community. Back to when you talked about teens and absenteeism, as you mentioned earlier. You know, we've had these teen takeovers that we've seen in the media. It has many communities on edge. Residents are some just frankly afraid to come out. And you talked about opportunities for teenagers to stay on the right track. What are your thoughts about that specifically and what your administration might do to tackle that?
You know, these teen takeovers that are happening across our city and across the country really is something that we have to deal with. And it's the small group of people, teens who are utilizing those spaces to then engage in fights and destructive activity are just completely unacceptable, as we know. What we hear from our young people, which we've listened to our young people, they've said, look, we need more third spaces and places that we can hang out and be. So I think the city and my plan is to actually create community hubs using our current government buildings and facilities. So those are third spaces that young people want to go. For example, many of our schools are opportunities for young people to hang out. We can make sure we have additional hours, additional programming in our schools to utilize that. As chair of the facilities committee I have funded additional hours, weekend and evening hours for DPR centers and additional funding for programming, because we know young people have said we want to be in our recreation centers. We also need teen programming that exists within them. With the teen takeovers particularly, we are alerted in advance of these takeovers, and we are able to use social media to track when these are happening. My plan is to be proactive. When we know a teen takeover is happening, we need to get our organizations, youth organizations who are trusted in the community on the ground, our violence interrupters on the ground, our safe passage workers on the ground to be there to make sure we are de-escalating spaces. If we think this is not a space they should be, offer them another opportunity or location to go. And I think it should be a place where we as a city say, look, our young people said, look, we are pandemic kids. We spend a lot of time inside. We want to be outdoors, and we want to be outdoors and do positive things. And so we want to give them positive things to do. And when those young people who are not being positive are not doing what they need to do, we absolutely have to hold them accountable. As a former attorney general who worked in the juvenile section and prosecuted young people as a result of serious crimes, I know that, that accountability is necessary. And I also know that we as a city can do more there. What I don't want to happen, what gets lost in the conversation, is that in these teen takeovers, we have the ability around the curfew to think about what the city can utilize our tools to do. And one of the scariest things right now is in many of our downtown locations like U Street and Navy Yard, we have armed National Troop Guards who are enforcing these laws. And we also have masked ICE agents, Homeland Security agents. I even went out there and saw like a IRS police officer, which I was like, I didn't even know the IRS had police officers. But the point is, these are federal agents who are not trained in de-escalation and dealing with our youth. They are not accountable to DC residents. And so as we look at tools that we utilize, we as a city have to use our tools wisely and be proactive about making sure these teen takeovers don't occur and we create safe spaces for our young people.
So we just have literally just a couple of minutes left, but I do want to get in the question that came in from a community member. You've built strong support among progressive voters and advocates focused on housing affordability, labor rights, and social justice. At the same time, some residents and business leaders have expressed concerns about whether your approach is too ideological and whether your administration could effectively balance reform priorities with public safety, economic stability, and broad coalition building across the district. Women in Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated are deeply invested in both equity and effective governance, particularly policies that produce measurable improvements in safety, education, economic mobility, and quality of life. So, if you could quickly answer, how would you demonstrate to residents who may not share your political ideology that your administration can govern pragmatically, build broad partnerships, and deliver measurable results on public safety, economic growth, and city services for all 8 wards?
Thank you so much for that question. I think that the best measure of how a person will lead and can lead is how they have led. And I've been proud to do all of these things, both big and small. I tell people, and all of those things have been rooted in me being a young Black woman who grew up in this city, who had Black women educators who believed in me and instilled in me the importance of education and the importance of standing up for our community. I often say we lift as we climb. That comes from Black women, knowing that when Black women lead, communities are invested in and communities grow. So for example, when I first got to the council, raising the wages for early childhood educators, Black and brown women, helped so many Black women economically, but it also helped our young people because we were able to expand access to childcare for so many families. I explained to people that when I fought to make sure we had librarians in all of our schools is because I understood that we have an adult literacy crisis, but we also have a youth literacy crisis. And we need people in place to help young people like myself, who was a first-generation college student. It was my librarian who filled out my FAFSA forms and helped me get into high school and helped me ultimately get into college, right? The work I did to create a basic income, putting money in the pockets of families, an earned income tax credit. These are things I did because we understood that people need money to survive. Affordability crisis is real. Those are things that have shown that my commitment to economic growth and upward mobility. But also look at the work that I did in Ward 4 on Kennedy Street, right? I grew up on Kennedy Street at a time where we were ravaged with gun violence. And when I first got in office, all Kennedy Street had to show for itself was carryouts and liquor stores, right? And now it's a vibrant corridor. Why? Because I made every agency responsible for public safety on Kennedy Street. And I brought in federal law enforcement. ATF, I wrote them a letter and said, look, we need to figure out why guns are being trafficked in our community, why drugs are being trafficked. Will you all help us out, right? And I showed that I can't do it alone, but we could do it together. And as a result of that, we had one of the biggest drug busts that occurred and got in getting rid of the trafficking of drugs and guns on Kennedy Street. But I also made so the Office of Tax and Revenue were taxing the buildings who were vacant and blighted, which ultimately got the gentleman who held all those properties to sell them. Those sold properties are now housing that people live in today. We have a HR records and Everyday Sunday. Now you can go to Kennedy Street and get coffee, ice cream, get a book, get some pizza. You can walk the neighborhood safely. And I know because my son goes to daycare right on that block every day, right? And so I say that to say I use both enforcement, prevention, and intervention work there. I knew as a prosecutor what it took to get the work done, and I made it happen. And so I say to people, in the last 5 years that I've been a council member, I've made sure our MPD department was fully funded. In fact, I earmarked funding for 4th District Police Department in my ward because we didn't have the tools that we needed to actually solve crime. So I put additional funding there. So I say you judge a person by their actions, and my actions have been clear that I'm a consensus builder, and I use those consensus building to get things done for the economic opportunity and growth of our community, especially our Black and brown residents who deserve a fighter who understands the way policies can displace us and the ways policies actually can help us and keep us grounded here in this city.
Well, thank you. We're out of time. Candidate Janice Lewis George, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We continue now with candidate Kenyon McDuffie. And thank you, candidate McDuffie, for joining us tonight for this candid conversation. Now, voters across the district are looking for leadership that can unite communities, address long-standing challenges, and deliver real results for residents in every ward. And tonight we have a few questions that we want to pose to you, including one from a community member. So let's start by talking about economic stability, housing, and general wealth. Washington, D.C. is facing rising housing costs, persistent racial wealth disparities, pressure on Black-owned businesses and growing concerns that longtime residents, especially middle-class Black families, are being priced out of the city that they helped build. At the same time, residents want economic growth that is inclusive, sustainable, and responsive to the needs of working families, seniors, entrepreneurs, as well as young people. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated has consistently emphasized economic empowerment, family stability, and building generational wealth as central priorities for strengthening communities. So the question, how will your administration create economic stability for Black families and protect pathways to generational wealth in Washington, D.C., while ensuring that economic growth closes those racial wealth gaps instead of widening them?
So thank you for the question. I really appreciate it and the opportunity to speak with you all this afternoon. I really appreciate that question because for me, it's not a theoretical issue. For me, it is personal. As I know it is for so many members of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I'm a fourth generation Washingtonian. I grew up in a neighborhood called Stronghold. I'm actually talking to you all from the home that my grandparents bought back in 1952, in which my wife and I purchased from my mom 20 years ago. And I've watched families who built this city struggle to remain in Washington, D.C., in the neighborhoods that they helped create. And so throughout my entire career in public service, I've focused on making sure that growth that we create as a city also creates opportunities for longtime residents and people who have largely not seen themselves reflected in the economic prosperity that we've seen over the last couple of decades. And so that's why my vision is one of economic growth with guardrails, so as not to displace people who are already here, who are trying to afford to be able to stay here. And so as mayor, every major development that I look at, from large developments to smaller ones, are going to be evaluated by asking one simple question: who benefits? It's the question that's driven the work that I've done as a council member. It's the same question that's going to drive the work that I do as a mayor, because we need to put in place policies that improve the lives of DC residents, especially Black families who historically have been discriminated against and not given the same opportunities. I want to make sure that working families, seniors, young folks, and longtime Washingtonians all have an opportunity to see themselves reflected in the future prosperity of Washington, D.C. And that's the framework that I've used in negotiations of major economic development projects like RFK. I was proud to be one of the council members who literally was in the room and sat across from the president of the commanders and the Halo Real Estate, and I fought for a strong community benefits package that ended up being about 5 times the amount of what they first offered. I fought to make sure that there were strong project labor agreements, local hiring commitments, increased participation of CBE and SBE businesses in the District of Columbia. And what I'm particularly proud of is my focus on ensuring that both the job opportunities and training opportunities prioritize wards 7, 8, and 5 in that order, so that we can connect residents who are in the communities most impacted and where you see unemployment and other challenges largely concentrated. I also made sure that when it came to the CBE and SBE opportunities for that, billions of dollars that's going to be invested there, that it prioritizes, and I helped to draft this language. I actually wrote this stuff with me and my staff, that it prioritizes wards 7, 8, and 5, and 6, the small businesses in those wards first, because those are the ones that are largely most impacted by this development. I also, working with Ward 7 Councilmember Wendell Felder, developed an amendment that he offered that helped to create a $60 million community investment fund. That's on top of the $50 million community benefits agreement. The two are different, but it's a $60 million community reinvestment fund, which is specifically designed to help prevent displacement. As we develop RFK, this is the work that I've been doing. It's the lens through which I view all my work as a public servant, through the lens of racial equity. I've been fighting to make this city more racially equitable, more socially just, and more economically inclusive. And I have a track record, unlike others in this race, I have a track record of actually delivering results when it comes to the ability to get things done. And I'm really proud of that track record. that I have in getting things done, because it is results that we're going to need from the next mayor as we look to fight Trump and to protect the city against home rule. And so, it is very important that we make sure that the next mayor is coming with the ability on day one to deliver these types of transformational projects in a way that is more equitable. And so I'm going to make sure that as mayor, I use that same framework on every project that comes before the District of Columbia. And I'm going to make sure that housing opportunity remains at the center of my affordability agenda. I'm going to make sure that we build 12,000 new units of housing across incomes, deeply affordable, including missing middle, so that people can afford to stay here and we can attract new residents. I'm going to make sure we are investing in home ownership so that we have the entire continuum of housing that we're building, multifamily rental, but also ownership. And we're going to put more resources into programs like the Housing Purchase Assistance Program and EHAP, the Employee Purchase Assistance Program, to allow people to have more opportunities to be first-time home buyers in the District of Columbia. People who look like the folks who are members of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, because that's deeply important for me and it's personal for me. And so I'm not asking you all to trust me based on what I'm saying I'm going to do as mayor. I'm asking you all to look at what I have done as a council member as an indication of what I'm capable of doing as the next mayor of the District of Columbia. I've had the pleasure of working with you all over my 13 and a half years as a council member to offer very transformational laws that have, allowed for creative and opportunities for Black people in the District of Columbia. And I'm happy to really, talk a little bit about some of them. But Baby Ones is one I want to highlight because it's a law that was, when I authored it, we were the second in the nation to pass a baby bonds bill and the first in the nation to fund it in 2021 for the FY22 budget. There's been a lot of misinformation put out there to say, oh, he passed the bill and never funded it. We fully funded baby bonds in the year 2021 to start in fiscal year 2022. And that program would have established $1,000 a year trust funds for babies born in the cycles of generational poverty in Washington, D.C. And it would have accrued interest over the years so that when they turn 18 years old, they've got about, $30,000, $35,000 sitting there for them, not designed to make them rich, but designed to give them hope, designed to give them opportunity, designed to give them the opportunity to do things like invest in their education, take up an apprenticeship, get a certificate in tech, maybe take up a trade, or maybe put some money down for college or to start a small business. The types of wealth building activities that other families, white families, have been doing for generations in this city. My work is designed to close the racial wealth gap in a way that is more meaningful than we've seen in the District of Columbia in the past. And I introduced the Child Wealth Building Act in 2021. We funded it every single fiscal year, despite the consecutive years where the mayor defunded it or reduced the funding. We put the funding back up until just last budget year where we had a gap that we couldn't fill. But as mayor, it's going to be one of the first things that I do. The REACH Act, the Racial Equity Achieves Results Act, embedded racial equity into DC government. It embedded on the council side and on the mayor's side. It was the first of its kind law, and it served as a model for other jurisdictions where we created the Council's Office of Racial Equity so that bills are being reviewed before passage, and we're utilizing a racial equity impact assessment that is designed to measure the impact specifically of potential bills on Black people and other marginalized communities in Washington, D.C. It was a landmark bill when we passed it, and that office is doing amazing work. There's also an Office of Racial Equity on the mayor's side, which needs to do more work. I've appreciated some of the things that they've done, but I'm going to put more resources in that work so that we create public accountability dashboards that people can access to see how we're measuring DC government's impact on programs and agencies across the government using the lens of racial equity. I did the first guaranteed basic income program in the city's history that provided direct cash assistance to pregnant and expecting moms in wards 5, 7, and 8. I authored, when COVID hit, a $100 million business grants program that sent grants and aid to businesses to try to help build a bridge so they can get across and get through COVID. I established a racial equity agenda when COVID hit and put together a working group that we refer to as an Equitable Recovery Advisory Group. It's one of the ways that I did the GBI program. It's one of the ways that I did the Commercial Property Acquisition Fund, recognizing that one of the ways that most people build wealth in America is through property ownership, right? You buy the home, you hope that it will get some equity that is accrued. Maybe you take that equity out to send a kid to college or to start a small business or to help you retire more comfortably. But what about commercial property? We had so many Black people running businesses in the District of Columbia who didn't own their commercial property. I recognized that challenge. I created a fund, seeded it with $5 million, called the Commercial Property Acquisition Fund. And since then, we've had several people, tens of it, over 50, I think closer to like 60 people buy their commercial properties in Washington, D.C., including in places like Georgetown. Angel Gagario, who started the Spice Suite, a Black woman who's a DC native, graduate of DC public schools, who couldn't buy her property in Tacoma Park because the guy who owned it owned the whole block, and it's been in his family for decades. He doesn't live here. I believe he lives on the Eastern Shore, right? I talked to multiple people like Angel and told them what I was doing, passed the law. Angel moved from Tacoma Park and bought the block in Langdon Park and is now incubating 7 Black women-owned businesses on shipping containers on her property, in addition to running a thriving Spice Suite. That's the kind of work that I've done. I'm passionate about this work. And as I started off by saying, this work is personal for me. When I did ban the box and put the amendment that put the teeth into the bill to make sure that employers can't check a person's record before first offering them a bona fide offer of employment that they're qualified, it's because I know people who are impacted by that. I authored the same thing, ban the box for housing. I did CBE reform. I did a disparity study a few years ago, recognizing that businesses that are minority-owned, women-owned, don't get the same opportunities to contract in DC, often because you have these big companies that have outsized budgets and resources that make it challenging for a smaller minority-owned business, woman-owned business to compete.
I'm sorry.
I'm
I
sorry.
hate to, I'm so sorry to interrupt you,
Okay.
but we did have one question from a community member, and we only have a few minutes left.
Yep.
I wanted, in fairness, to get an opportunity to ask you that question. And that is, so many DC residents appreciate, you've mentioned your years of experience in city government and your focus, as you've mentioned, on economic growth and affordability. However, some community advocates and progressive organizations have questioned whether you close alignment with businesses and development interests may limit your willingness to aggressively address racial wealth inequities, housing displacement, and utility affordability issues that disproportionately impact Black women and families in the district. Of course, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated has long prioritized economic empowerment, equitable access to opportunity, and protecting vulnerable communities from being left behind during periods of growth and development. So the question that we have is how, from a community member, how would you reassure Black women, working families, and longtime residents that your administration would prioritize equitable outcomes over developer and corporate interests when difficult policy decisions about housing, affordability, and neighborhood investments arise?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. And, look, this is a campaign, and I fully expect that people are going to challenge and ask tough questions. But the reality is that as mayor, I'm going to build on the things that I've done as a council member. The characterization that I'm closely aligned with developers is something that's been put out there by my principal opponent and others who wish to tear me down in order to lift themselves up, because frequently they don't have the record to demonstrate their ability to do the things that they say they're going to do as a candidate. You all are probably heard from multiple candidates, either in this forum and in other places, who said they're going to build all this housing. They're going to help all these businesses. They're going to fight for people. But when you look at their records, you don't see a track record of actually delivering results. I'm I'm closely aligned with the people of Washington, D.C. That's where my alignment has always been, and that's where it's always going to remain, because this work is so personal for me. Right? I mean, I don't know if you all know, and I want to just be crystal clear. My trajectory of being before you all as a former council member and a lawyer and a candidate for mayor was not a straight line. I graduated from high school at DC Public Schools and didn't even apply to a single college. I dropped out from UDC 2 times. I carried mail for several years, and it was a tragedy where I lost 2 friends not far from where I'm sitting that inspired me to resign from the Postal Service, to go back to UDC for the 3rd time, to transfer over to Howard University, graduate in the top 5% of my class, and become the first man in my family to earn a college degree. So the characterization of how somehow I'm closely aligned with business is just false. I've worked with business, but I've worked with Alpha Kappa, Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and every other sorority, fraternity, and Divine Nine to do things like tax abatements to keep them in their properties, right? Because I recognize the legacy of what you all have contributed, not just to DC, but to this country and the world. It is not lost on me that Black people have started this race from way behind. And I've been unabashed in proclaiming the need for this city to do its work through a racial equity lens. It's why I established the REACH Act. It's why I challenge developers. It's why I created a framework that gives more weight to developers who apply to do DC projects. It gives more weight when you come with 51% minority ownership. Since I created that framework in 2019, most of the development that's been solicited and awarded in DC has been Black developers. And in some cases, Black women developers. We've never seen that in Washington, D.C. It's because I fought to get that done. And I know that when we have a president like Donald Trump, who is making it increasingly difficult for people to be able to afford to stay in D.C., that we need a champion who not only says what they're going to do as mayor, but has demonstrated a track record on the council of actually delivering results. And I have to tell you, I think a lot of your members know the work that I've done because I've done it with them. They've been there, they've testified, they've shown up on lobby days, and we've worked together to do these projects. And so I would ask that people understand that we're in a campaign, and I've been called everything under the sun except a child of God. But the reality is this: when it comes to PepCo, I'm not closely aligned with PepCo. I challenged PepCo to do better. When we were getting all those brownouts and blackouts about 10 years ago, I held hearings that some of these people running for mayor never bothered to show up at, where we took PepCo's track record of brownouts and blackouts, where we increased reliability, so that they're actually being recognized as like the second ranked in reliability when it comes to utilities. That's the kind of work that I do: rigorous oversight, working hard to put in place solutions to intractable issues that we face in Washington, D.C. And I'm not ashamed to put Black people first. So I'm not just telling you, again, what I'm committing to do as mayor. I am going to do that as mayor because it is building on the work that I've done as a council member that I know now more than ever Washington, D.C. needs, so that we're not leaving people behind. And we're closing, which is the largest racial wealth gap of any city in the United States, right here in the nation's capital. That's why this work is so important. That's why we cannot rely on rhetoric in a campaign to determine who the next mayor is. And we really need somebody with experience and a track record of delivering results.
We're going to leave it right there. We thank you so much for your time. Candidate Kenyon McDuffie, thank you so much for joining us this
Thank
evening.
you all so much for the opportunity. As always, it is a pleasure to spend time with the wonderful women of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I really do appreciate y'all's advocacy over the years, in particular in this critical moment as we elect our next mayor, who we know is going to have to really stand up and fight back against Trump in a way that we haven't seen, and deliver a city that is safer, that's more affordable, and more opportunity rich, particularly for communities that have not seen the opportunity over the years. So thank you all. Take good care.
Have a good evening. Close us out is Lakila Stemmons, co-chair of Zeta Omega's Connection and Social Action Committee. Hi, Lakila.
Good evening, and thank you so much. As we come to the close of tonight's program, We want to extend our deepest appreciation to everyone who made this forum a success. With a special thank you to Zeta Omega members Megan Moore, who chaired tonight's event, our technology team anchored by Jennifer Coleman, our moderator, Jennifer Thomas, and my co-chair, Chanel Andre. To our mayoral candidates, thank you for your time, your perspectives, and your willingness to engage directly with the community on issues that matter most to residents across the District of Columbia. To our partners across the graduate chapters of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated in Washington, D.C., thank you. Thank you for your collaboration, your leadership, and shared commitment to civic engagement and service. Your collective efforts continue to strengthen our impact and expand our reach within communities we serve. We are especially grateful to Grow Democracy DC Civic Engagement Funds and Kenyatta Smith for providing valuable education on ranked choice voting and helping ensure that voters are equipped with the tools to confidently participate in the electoral process. To our members, community leaders, and all guests in attendance, thank you. Thank you for showing up, staying engaged, and investing your time in the future of the district. Your presence reflects the power of informed and active citizenship. As we leave here tonight, we encourage everyone to carry these conversations forward. Carry them into your homes, your neighborhoods, your places of worship, and your communities. Civic engagement doesn't end with tonight. It continues with each conversation, each act of advocacy, and each vote cast. Most importantly, we encourage each of you to make a plan to vote, to stay informed, and continue being active participants in shaping the future of Washington, D.C. On behalf of tonight's organizers, thank you again for being here. Be safe, be well, and we look forward to seeing you continue in service and in community. Have a great evening.